Senator Rick Scott here. Let me give you a travel warning. If you're a socialist, communist, somebody that believes in big government, I would think twice. Think twice if you're thinking about taking a vacation or moving to Florida. We're the free state of Florida. We actually don't believe in socialism. We actually know people, and some people in our state lived under it. We know people lived under socialism. It's not good. It's not good for anybody. So if you're thinking about it, if you think about coming to Florida and you're a socialist or communist, think twice. We like freedom, liberty, capitalism, things like that.
That unsettling video is from Senator Rick Scott of Florida last June, trying to be MAGA, I guess, using all the key words that get those culture war triggers going. And he got what he wanted. He got his Fox News airtime for that clever little ad. But man, is it creepy, right? But you know, it's Rick Scott, and he is who he is. So he couldn't just stop with that. Here's his most recent video from January. Watch this one.
Is garlic dangerous? Well, maybe. You see, Communist China produces the majority of the world's garlic. But what Communist China doesn't tell you is exactly how they're producing it. Now, we already know that Communist China doesn't play by our rules or have Americans' best interests in mind. Communist China has a proven track record of producing unsafe goods. We can't trust its food to be safe for our families. This is especially true for garlic grown in Communist China.
Communist China garlic. Communist China. And here's the punchline. You know, he filmed that against a green screen. Somebody looked it up. It's actually Google image of a grocery store. I guess he couldn't even make the way to an actual grocery store like Dr. Oz did. I got to tell you, the film genre of multi-millionaire looking foolish in a grocery store is quickly becoming one of my favorite ones. But that's who Rick Scott is. As I mentioned, he's a multi-millionaire, former two-term governor of Florida, disgraced healthcare executive. Now he's running for re-election for a second term. And he's also eyeing the vacated minority leader position that Mitch McConnell just announced that he's going to retire from. But he's got competition this cycle. Debbie Mucarsel-Powell is the first South American immigrant ever elected to Congress. And she's running a great race against him that we're going to talk about. I wanted to catch up with her, see what her priorities are, talk about the unique nature of Florida politics and the unique nature of her weird opponent. So here we are. We're going to get her to the hot seat. My name's Fred Wellman. I'm the host of On Democracy with FP Wellman, right here in the MeidasTouch Network. Now you're in the hot seat. Man, Debbie, thank you for joining me here on In the Hot Seat. I'm just thrilled to talk to you today.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. I was really looking forward to this today.
Oh, I appreciate that. Now, you know, I was doing my research, getting ready. New Emily's List poll just came out. You are close. I mean, you got a lot of news down there in Florida that it's a 3 point. He's only ahead by 3 points inside the margin of error, which is, I think a lot of people would be surprised to find out. You know, Rick Scott is, you know, beyond being a weird looking Nosferatu, my brother, you are in the hunt. So why do you think this race is winnable this year?
Look, Fred, this is actually the third poll that confirms what I was feeling before I decided to launch my race for Senate, that people here in Florida know that Rick Scott is a fraud. He was governor for 2 terms here in the state. They know him well. They don't trust him. And he's underwater. There was a Republican poll a few months ago that shows him that he's the most vulnerable Republican here in the state of Florida. And when people know who he is, that he oversaw the largest Medicare fraud in the history of this country, that he's the man that actually wrote the plan to sunset Social Security and Medicare. He wants to raise taxes on middle-class families. He's pushing a national abortion ban. This is not who Florida is. I know that there's all this misperception. No, we are a very independent state. When we get the information that we need and we have the right people running and the structure to get our voters out, we win. And that's what I'm excited about. And yes, I know I can beat them. That's the reason why I decided to run, because of my family. My mother lives with me, Fred, and I've seen her struggling with her fixed income from Social Security, getting her health care through Medicare. But Rick Scott, you know, when you can put $64 million of your own money into a race, that's how he won in 2018. And by the way, only by 10,000 votes. There was a recount. When you can do that and barely win, you have no idea, right, what it's like for so many families that are struggling across our state because of the unaffordability of housing. You know, we have a property insurance crisis. He doesn't care. He only cares about power and his own self-gain.
And I was going to ask you about that. I mean, we hear a lot about the affordability crisis. I have family who live in Florida, and hopefully you'll be their senator. Both my brothers live there. I'll be there this weekend in Jacksonville, as a matter of fact.
I would love to
And
represent them.
I
Yeah.
love it, and it would be fantastic. But you is a unique. I tell every candidate I work with it. You have to run your district, you have to run your state, and your state does have a real problem with this affordability crisis. What does that mean when people hear those terms, affordability crisis, and how can that be solved?
Yeah, look, the property insurance crisis here, just to give you an idea, our
Mhm.
property insurance rates here in the state of Florida are like 300% higher than the national average. And it's
Wow.
because of failed policies that actually started under Rick Scott when he was governor. He
Mhm.
took hundreds of thousands of dollars from insurance companies, brought in a private, unregulated market to the state of Florida, and then they made millions through these insurance policies, but then they left in the past year, they've all left and leaving more than 100,000 Floridians without that coverage. And of course, that affects rent people that are renting their apartments or their homes. A lot of young adults, Fred, people that are just graduated from college, between the ages of 21 to 31, 35, they can't afford to have their own place. They have to live with their parents. They can't afford to buy a home for these families that are starting out. And it's a real problem. And that's one of the reasons why I'm seeing people wanting to leave the state. Seniors. I just had a conversation. I was at a senior center where some of the seniors are being priced out of their homes. It is cruel. It is a failure by Rick Scott and some of the most extreme politicians here in the state of Florida. And let me tell you something. When I go to the Senate, this is going to be my priority. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that we protect the people of Florida, that we give them those opportunities, the opportunities that brought me to this country when I came from my home country of Ecuador.
Wow, and that's amazing. I mean, you were the first, I mentioned, South American immigrant elected to Congress, and pulling that thread more on that, like you said, and I just don't think Florida's alone in that affordability crisis, right? Climate change is a very real thing, and I know that Florida's a couple of feet above. I mean, I think the highest point is like 10 feet, right? It is. It's so climate change is a very real thing, not just nationally, it's a national security issue. But it's a real issue in Florida. So while Florida is having an affordability crisis, you're going to have to face that in the Senate. That you guys are sort of I guess, had to turn a canary in a coal mine in a lot of ways, right?
100%. And when I was in Congress, one of the first things that I did is lead an effort to bring $200 million for Everglades restoration.
Wow.
I actually, Francis Rooney, he represented an area here in Florida, very conservative Republican. We didn't have a lot in common or agree on a lot, but we both cared about the environment and we did a lot of things together protecting our coral reefs out here in the state. So
Yeah.
let's look for 1 second what Rick Scott did. When he was governor, he banned the term climate change from any of the state agencies to be used. He rolled back protections for clean water, and that's why people here call him Red Tide Rick. He
Ah,
actually
yeah.
caused one of the biggest fish kills, and we're seeing some of that happening again right now in our state.
Well, and you also face a larger crisis. You've had Ron DeSantis and his bizarre race for president. He's got some really, let's be very honest, another canary in the coal mine issue I look at when I look at Florida is the authoritarianism side of this, right? The pro democracy thing that we've talked about. A lot of us talk about quite a bit. I call myself a pro democracy advocate, for lack of a better term. And you have in Florida have kind of experienced that in the kind of scary things that could come nationally for us. You're an immigrant. I mean, I've heard you talk before about many Latino immigrants, especially coming to Florida. You fled from countries that were authoritarian. Is it more meaningful for you as you face this issue, these assaults on our democracy?
Oh, I've been seeing it now since I got elected in 2018. And I can tell you, for so many of us, like you said, who have fled these dictatorships in Latin America, some of them socialist dictatorships, we need to make that very, very clear, that have destroyed the economic, political, and social institutions in those countries, that have really created a place where people have to flee political persecution, political violence. And that is why, for me, we need to make sure people understand what it looks like. And I can tell you, Fred, I have seen what government interference looks like when they're making decisions on your everyday life. It's exactly what Republicans right now, like Rick Scott, are trying to do, taking away a woman's right to choose, attacking education, for example, trying to censor freedom of expression and freedom of speech here in our universities. This is the playbook of authoritarians. And only people like myself, and a lot of us that live here in South Florida, who have lived it know the threat. And it can happen overnight. And it can happen by someone winning an election free and fair through democracy and then using that to destroy all of our freedoms and all of our values here in America. We can't let that happen. Let me just say, I am doing everything in my power to make sure that at the very least, we hold the Senate majority, because we can't win the Senate. We cannot hold it if we do not win Florida. So I want everyone listening to understand, when I tell you this, I know I can beat them. I need you with me.
Well, and the lovely thing too is, look, to be honest, every candidate says they're going to win, right? But you got some numbers. You're raising money. You have definitely separated yourself from the pack, and it's hard. You guys, I think, have you're like another August primary state like Missouri, so it's a long primary. But again and again, you are seen as as I was doing the research, you're in the lead right now, and you're the number one, and you've got to win the thing. And you've had an interesting life, man. I mean, you lost your. I was saddened to hear that you lost your father at a young age to gun violence. I'm sure that has a special place in your heart, the idea of gun violence and public safety. And how do you approach that in your politics?
Well, actually, it is, I think, one of the reasons why I'm here talking to you today. I mean, it really changed my trajectory. I was getting my master's degree when I got that call. I'm never going to forget that day. It changed my life completely, that my father had been shot and killed by a criminal with a gun. And, my father didn't walk me down the aisle. He never got to meet my children. And I think of him every single day. It's a pain and trauma that has really linked me to tens of thousands of families here in the state of Florida and across the United States. And when I was in Congress, I was a fierce advocate to pass gun safety regulations. And here in the state of Florida, I've been working very closely with Gabby Giffords. I'm so grateful for her and the Giffords organization, because we created a statewide program here in the state of Florida for gun violence prevention. And I want to continue to do that work, because it is the greatest moral failure, Fred, that we have politicians like Rick Scott in the pocket of the gun lobby that are doing their bidding and watching our children die every single day. This is one of the top issues for parents that I talk to here in the state of Florida. I mean, I think about it when I drop off my daughter, my youngest. It's right. Something that really is in the back of all of our minds, and it doesn't have to be that way. And by the way, since you're talking about authoritarianism and dictatorships, which I've seen firsthand, let me just say that the gun trafficking that we're seeing, that are the guns that are being purchased here in states like Florida, where they have very lax gun laws, they're using them and taking them to Haiti, where they're right now being ravaged by violence, by gangs. The same thing in Ecuador, the same thing in Latin America. And people need to pay attention to that. So I don't want to hear one Republican say that they care about crime. Do something about gun violence and not allowing these people to have easy access to weapons.
And it's overly supported. I did a piece a while ago about, I call it supermajority issues. A woman's right to choose. A majority of Americans, by this to the 73%, believe they should have a choice. Overwhelming, like a ridiculous amount of America, 81% support universal background checks. They support red flag laws. Common sense restrictions could save many lives. It's not about ripping your guns away or that craziness we constantly hear. They go to the extreme. There really are reasonable measures we can take, aren't there?
Exactly. And I always say it's gun safety. There's a culture in many, especially in rural areas, where families grow up with having guns, they go hunting. That's fine. But why would they oppose someone that has a criminal background or a violent background to have an easy access to a weapon? We have gun shows here, Fred, where people are walking in and then walking out without a background check, purchasing weapons. Or they're purchasing it through the internet and building their own guns. That's the loophole that we need to close. And those are the things that really we all agree on. So let's get back to that.
Yep. And that's it. And that's where we have to find our ways. And there are ways to bring together. And the bipartisan term is so dirty these days. But we do have issues we agree on. If we just have to find a way to work with them and not go to the extreme. And you're definitely up against a real extremist this time, aren't you?
No, completely. And let me remind everyone also that, and you, Fred, he wants to run for leadership. He wants to take over Mitch McConnell's spot there. And he would decide what bills to bring to the floor. And we've seen who he is. He would push a national abortion ban. He would make it so that end sunset Medicare and Social Security. He would do nothing on our climate crisis. He wouldn't bring down the affordability. What he's doing is trying to continue to cut taxes for himself and his friends and then raise it for the middle class. I mean, this is who he is. There are receipts on that. And that's why it's so dangerous, not just for Florida, but for America.
Well, I'm thrilled that you're absolutely right. I mean, he is a uniquely odious, odious member of the Senate. I'm so glad you're taking him on. Most important question of all, of course, how can people find you? How can they support you? Where's your website? How can
Well,
people
I
come see
would
you
love
more?
to have everyone watching and spread the word. Go to debbieforflorida.com. Please follow me at Debbie4FL. I'm on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Facebook. Hey, I even have a TikTok account, and apparently there's some of them are going viral. So anyone want to follow me at Debbie4FL, Debbieforflorida.com. I need you with me. We can do this.
I love it. Well, ma'am, thank you, Debbie. I appreciate it. It's great talking to you. I appreciate your flexibility. I hope to catch up to you later in the cycle, and I'll keep track of what you're doing. Keep me posted.
Thank you so much, Fred.
Thank you. Man, what a great conversation. And I realized something as we were talking, if you look at Rick Scott, you know who else is scared of garlic? Just saying. Just think about that for a second. He does seem to have a problem with garlic, and I just don't want to take any. And he did that. Well, I don't even want to. Having said that, this has been another great conversation. I am really enjoying having these conversations with incredible candidates running for office. We'll be presenting a lot more of this, these great on democracy in the hot seat conversations. I'm glad you joined us. Man, we have got a fight ahead of us for this country. There's so many amazing people who have had the courage to step up and run for office, and I want you to meet a lot of them. So with that, again, I am Fred Wellman. I am the host of On Democracy with FP Wellman. We premiere new episodes every Friday night at 11 p.m. Eastern, right in the MeidasTouch Network. I hope you'll follow us and watch us. In the meantime, keep up the fight.